Luke Carter woke before sunrise, just as he did every morning on his quiet ranch at the edge of the wide Texas plains. The air was cool and soft, the kind that carried the scent of early grass and the promise of a peaceful day. Luke loved these morning hours when the world felt calm and slow. He walked out to the barn with his hat low over his eyes, thinking only about feeding the horses and checking the fences after last night's wind. He was halfway through his chores when he heard the distant sound of wheels rolling over dirt. It wasn't a sound he normally heard this early. Mail wagons came later in the afternoon, and supply wagons only passed through once a week. Curious, he stepped outside the barn and shaded his eyes with one hand. Through the morning haze, he saw a stagecoach moving toward his neighbor Earl Jennings's house. Luke frowned a little. Stagecoaches rarely came here unless they were dropping something important. Earl lived alone and avoided company whenever he could. Luke had known him for years, but their conversations never went past short greetings. Earl wasn't a bad man, just impatient, always in a hurry, and rarely polite. The stagecoach stopped in front of Earl's house in a cloud of dust. Luke watched from his ranch, not close enough to hear anything, but close enough to see everything clearly. The driver stepped down first, then opened the door for a young woman inside. Luke's breath caught for a moment, not because she was unusually beautiful or anything dramatic like that, but because she looked so out of place. She held a small wooden trunk with both hands, and her eyes searched the area with a mix of nervousness and hope. Her dress was clean but simple, and her hair was tied neatly under a scarf. She stood straight, trying to look confident, but Luke could see the slight tremble in her hands even from far away. He wiped his palms on his jeans and watched as Earl came out of the house. Earl's posture was stiff, and even at a distance Luke could tell he was not pleased. Earl walked toward the woman with short, sharp steps. The woman said something to him. Luke saw her smile gently, hopeful and shy. But Earl shook his head immediately. Luke's stomach tightened. He couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language well. Earl lifted his hands in frustration, speaking quickly. The woman took a small step back, her smile fading. She said something else, softer this time, almost like a question. Earl threw his arms toward the house in a rough gesture that looked like refusal. The woman's face dropped. She tried again, pointing at her trunk, maybe explaining something. But Earl stepped away from her, shaking his head more firmly. Luke felt a heaviness inside his chest. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but he could tell something was wrong. The driver of the stagecoach looked uncomfortable too. He stood near the horses, glancing between Earl and the woman as if unsure whether he should stay or leave. After a minute, he cleared his throat, lifted the trunk, and set it down gently on the ground near Earl's gate. Then, he tipped his hat to the woman and returned to the coach. Within moments, the stagecoach rolled away, leaving a trail of dust behind it. Now there were just two people, Earl and the woman, standing in the quiet morning air. Luke leaned against the fence and watched as Earl spoke again. The woman listened, nodding, as if trying to understand every word. She clutched her hands together tightly. From where Luke stood, he could see her shoulders rise and fall with each breath. Suddenly, Earl pointed toward the road, not toward his house, toward the road. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. She said something, her words came out fast and anxious, but Earl only shook his head again and waved her away. Then, without warning, Earl turned and walked back to his porch. He didn't help her. He didn't invite her inside. He didn't even look back. He simply left her standing alone in his yard. Luke felt something twist inside him. It wasn't anger exactly, it was more like concern mixed with confusion. The woman stood still for a long moment, staring at Earl's closed door. Her hands gently touched the scarf on her head, as if trying to hold herself together. Luke could see now that she was young, maybe in her early 20s. The dust from the road had settled on her skirt, and her small trunk looked heavy beside her feet. She didn't move forward or backward. She just stayed there, frozen between hope and loneliness. A soft breeze brushed across the fields, lifting the edges of her scarf. She looked around the land slowly, turning her head toward Luke's ranch, though he doubted she saw him from so far away. Her expression was one he recognized, well lost, unsure, and trying hard not to look frightened. Luke took off his hat and sighed quietly. Something wasn't right. A woman didn't travel all the way out here without a purpose. She didn't arrive on a stagecoach to a man's home unless she had been promised something, maybe work, maybe a home, maybe marriage. Luke knew about mail-order brides. It wasn't uncommon in these parts. Many men wrote letters to women from different countries, offering them a home and a new life in America. Some matches worked well. Others, not so well. But abandoning someone upon arrival? That felt wrong. Deeply wrong. He watched her bend down slowly to rest her hand on her trunk, her posture heavy, as if her legs were tired from a long journey and from the shock of what had just happened. She looked toward Earl's house again. But nothing changed. The door stayed shut. For a moment, Luke thought maybe Earl would come back out, maybe to explain himself or apologize. But minutes passed, and the porch remained empty. Finally, Luke couldn't take it anymore. He picked up his hat, brushed the dust off his shirt, and started walking toward Earl's ranch. His steps were calm and steady. He didn't want to frighten the woman or cause more trouble with Earl, but he couldn't just stand and watch someone be left alone in a strange place with no idea what to do next. As he approached, the woman turned her head toward him. She straightened up quickly, brushing her hands on her skirt. Her eyes were large and uncertain, but polite. Luke offered her a gentle nod as he came closer. "Morning," he said softly, keeping his voice calm and friendly. She responded with a small smile, but he wasn't sure she understood the word. Luke pointed at himself lightly. "I'm Luke. I live over there," he said, gesturing toward his ranch. He spoke slowly, hoping she would catch the meaning even if she didn't know all the words. She nodded, understanding enough to relax a little. Then she pointed at herself and said, "Anya." Her voice was light and careful, as though she was trying to say the name in a way he could easily understand. Luke nodded kindly. "Anya, nice to meet you." Anya smiled again, but the smile trembled slightly. Luke glanced at Earl's house before asking gently, "Everything all right?" Anya looked down at her trunk, then back at Earl's closed door. She shook her head slowly. Her eyes lowered again, and Luke could see a softness there, a quiet hurt she was trying hard not to show. He let out a quiet breath. Earl should have been the one helping her. Earl should have been standing right here, explaining things, making sure she had somewhere to go. But instead, she was alone, with only her trunk and a name she had spoken carefully to a stranger. Luke didn't know exactly what happened yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't just turn around and walk back home. Not now. Not after seeing all this. He looked at Anya again, offering a calm, warm smile meant to comfort her. She held his gaze for a moment, and in that moment, Luke felt something shift in the quiet morning air, like a story was beginning. One neither of them had planned, but one that had already started on its own. Luke stood beside Anya for a moment, giving her time to breathe and settle her thoughts. The morning sun was beginning to warm the ground, and a quiet stillness surrounded them. Anya kept her hands clasped together, her eyes drifting from the road to her trunk and back to Luke, as if she was unsure what to do next or what she was allowed to do. Luke cleared his throat softly. "Do you need some water?" he asked, pointing toward his ranch, then making a drinking gesture, hoping she would understand. Anya hesitated before nodding gently. Her shoulders relaxed just enough to show she was grateful for the offer. Luke bent down to lift her trunk. The moment he grasped the handle, he realized how heavy it was. She must have packed everything she owned, everything she hoped would help her start a new life. For a second, he wondered how far she had traveled and how long she had been on the road. "Let's take this," he said kindly, though he knew she couldn't understand the words. Still, Tone sometimes mattered more than language. Anya watched him pick up the trunk, her eyes widening in surprise. She opened her mouth as if to protest. Maybe she felt she shouldn't trouble him, but the words didn't come. Instead, she simply gave a small, thankful smile and followed him as he started walking toward his ranch. The walk wasn't long, but it felt important. Anya walked a few steps behind Luke, looking around at the land. She seemed to take in every detail: the wide open fields, the distant tree line, the horses grazing near the fence. Her eyes softened as she looked at the calm scenery, as if she felt a bit safer with each step. Luke noticed this and felt a quiet sense of relief. He didn't know what she had gone through before arriving here, but anyone would feel shaken after being left alone. He wanted her to feel welcome, even if just for a little while. When they reached his ranch, Luke pushed open the gate and led her toward the porch. His home wasn't large or fancy, but it was clean and warm, built from strong wood, with a roof that kept out the rain and wind. The porch had a chair he often sat in during sunsets. This morning, it looked like the perfect place for Anya to rest. He set the trunk down beside the wall and turned to her. "You sit," he said gently, pointing to the chair. Anya understood this time. She nodded and sat carefully, her back straight and her hands resting on her lap. Luke stepped inside the house for a moment and came back with a glass of cool water. When he handed it to her, she accepted it with both hands, her fingers brushing the glass lightly as if she was afraid she might break it. She took a small sip first, then another, and then a long one. Her eyes closed in relief. She must have been thirsty from the long journey. "Better?" Luke asked. She opened her eyes and nodded quickly. "Thank you," she said, her accent soft but clear. Luke smiled. It was nice hearing her speak a word he understood. "You're welcome." For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Luke leaned against the porch railing, while Anya kept her eyes on the glass, turning it slowly between her palms. She looked calmer now, but still unsure of the situation. Luke decided it was time to gently understand what had happened. He pointed in the direction of Earl's house. "Earl, he say no?" he asked slowly, making a small gesture of refusal with his hand. Anya watched his gestures carefully, then looked down. She nodded once, small and quiet. Luke nodded back thoughtfully. He didn't want to press too hard, but he needed to understand enough to help her. "You come for work?" he asked, miming sweeping with his hand. "Then cooking." Anya shook her head. He tried again. "You come to marry?" He pointed to a pretend ring on his finger. This time, Anya hesitated before nodding slowly. Her eyes lowered again, and she took a quiet breath. Luke felt a soft ache in his chest. So it was, as he suspected. She had come here, expecting a future, expecting someone who promised her a home, maybe a family, and instead, the man had turned her away the moment she stepped down from the stagecoach. Luke didn't understand what Earl had been thinking. If Earl had changed his mind, he could have written a letter. He could have warned her or arranged a safer place for her to go. But Earl wasn't known for thinking kindly before acting. Anya looked up at Luke suddenly, worry in her eyes. She tapped her chest lightly and said, "No home." Then she pointed to the road. Luke understood. She didn't know where to go now. He leaned his elbows on the railing and looked over the fields for a moment, thinking. He couldn't let her stay out in the open, with no place to sleep, no food, and no one to talk to. But he also didn't want her to feel pressured or uncomfortable. He knew how it might look, bringing a young woman into his home without knowing her well. Gossip traveled quickly, in small towns. He turned back to her with a gentle expression. "You can stay here," he said slowly, tapping the porch floor. "Just for now. Safe. Okay?" Anya watched him, trying to understand the meaning behind each word. When she understood safe, her shoulders relaxed noticeably. When she understood stay here, She pressed her hand lightly to her chest and nodded. "Thank you," she said again, her voice slightly stronger this time. Luke smiled. "My pleasure." He motioned for her to follow him inside the house. She picked up her scarf a little tighter around her hair and stepped inside carefully. Luke's home was simple but comfortable. The floor was wooden and smooth from years of use. The fireplace was clean, with a few pieces of chopped wood stacked nearby. A small table stood in the center of the room with 2 chairs beside it. There was a kitchen space with clean dishes stacked on a shelf. Anya looked around with wide eyes, taking in everything with quiet wonder. She ran her hand lightly along the table's edge, as if checking its texture. Luke realized she was probably trying to adjust to being somewhere unfamiliar. "You hungry?" he asked. He mimed eating again, bringing his hand to his mouth. Anya nodded quickly. She hadn't eaten since she stepped off the coach, and perhaps not much earlier either. Luke prepared a simple meal: bread, warm soup he reheated, and some fruit. Anya sat politely at the table, hands folded neatly until he placed the food in front of her. When she tasted the soup, she closed her eyes for a moment, as if savoring warmth she hadn't felt in days. She ate slowly, not wanting to seem ungrateful or greedy, but Luke could tell she was hungry. "You eat as much as you want," he said kindly. She nodded, still eating carefully. As she ate, Luke sat across from her, trying to think of how to help her. She was a stranger in a strange place, with very little English. She had no family nearby, no friends, no plan, and worst of all, she had been brought here under the expectation of a future that had been taken away in minutes. When Anya finished eating, she looked up at Luke with a soft smile. He smiled back. "I'm glad." Then he pointed toward a small room down the hall. "You can rest there," he said. Anya looked toward the room and then at him, her eyes full of gratitude and relief. She stood up, holding her scarf with one hand, and walked slowly toward the room. Before entering, she turned and gave him a small nod that said more than words could. Luke nodded back. "You're safe here," he whispered, though she might not have understood. But something in her eyes told him she did. As she disappeared into the room, Luke stepped outside onto the porch again, looking toward Earl's house in the distance. A small sigh slipped from his chest. He didn't know what the coming days would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. He had done the right thing. Even if the situation was complicated, even if gossip spread, he couldn't let someone be abandoned with nowhere to go. Inside the house, Anya gently placed her hand on the soft blanket of the bed, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. For the first time since arriving, she felt a small spark of hope. Their paths had crossed by accident, but something told her it wasn't just chance. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one she never expected. Luke let Anya rest for the rest of the morning. He could hear her soft footsteps inside the guest room now and then, and sometimes he heard nothing at all. He didn't want to disturb her, knowing she had traveled far and had gone through a very stressful morning. Instead, he spent time outside tending to the ranch the way he usually did, feeding the animals, checking the fences, brushing down the horses. But today, he kept glancing toward the house much more often than he realized. By the time the sun had climbed high into the sky, Luke decided to check on her gently. He walked inside, wiped the dust from his hands, and knocked softly on the guest room door. There was a brief silence. Then, the door opened a little. Anya peeked out, her hair now untied from the scarf, and loosely falling over her shoulders. She looked more rested. Her eyes weren't as full of worry as before. "You okay?" Pointing to himself and giving a small thumbs up, Anya smiled shyly and nodded. "Yes, I am okay," she said, her words slow but clear. Luke felt relieved. He stepped back to give her space. "If you want, you can come outside." "I'm working with the horses," he said. using simple gestures, shaping his hands like hooves, and pretending to pull a rope. Anya giggled softly, clearly amused by the way he tried to act out everything. She nodded and stepped out of the room, brushing the wrinkles out of her dress. As they walked outside, Anya stayed close to him, looking around the ranch with curiosity. Everything seemed new to her. The tall wooden fences, the cows quietly grazing, the chickens pecking at the ground, and the horses swishing their tails under the warm sun. Luke opened the gate to the barn and guided her inside. The smell of hay and wood filled the air. Sunlight streamed through the gaps between the boards, creating warm stripes of light. "This is Star," Luke said, patting the side of a brown mare. He wasn't sure she understood the name, but Anya smiled and reached out a hand. She paused, waiting for Luke's approval. He nodded. She gently touched Star's soft neck, her eyes lighting up with wonder. "She is beautiful," Anya said in her careful English. Luke smiled. "She likes people." Anya nodded and brushed her hand lightly along the horse's warm coat. The horse snorted softly and lowered its head, enjoying the attention. For a moment, Anya seemed to forget everything that had happened earlier. She looked peaceful, almost happy. Luke watched her, quietly. It was strange he had lived around these animals every day. Yet seeing her reaction made him appreciate them all over again. After a few minutes, Luke handed her a small brush. He showed her how to move it along the horse's coat. Anya followed his actions carefully, brushing gently and steadily. A simple activity, but it made her feel useful again. "You learn fast," Luke said. Anya chuckled softly. "You teach good." Luke felt warmth rise in his chest. He wasn't used to compliments, especially not from someone who spoke with such sincerity. They spent the next hour brushing the horses together. Luke taught her a few English words: brush, horse, tail, hay. Anya repeated each word slowly, trying to say them as clearly as possible. Sometimes she said them perfectly. Sometimes she laughed at her own mistakes. But every attempt made Luke smile. When they finished, Anya pointed at herself and said, "Help more?" Luke nodded. "Of course. But you rest too." She shook her head lightly. Luke admired her spirit. She didn't want to sit still and worry. She wanted to be useful, to feel like she belonged somewhere, even if only for a short time. They moved on to other chores, gathering eggs from the chicken coop, sweeping the porch, and filling water buckets. Anya tried everything Luke showed her. Sometimes she struggled. Sometimes she surprised him with how quickly she understood. Either way, she put her whole heart into each task. Around midday, Luke noticed her slowing down. Her steps became smaller, and she rubbed her hands together as if they were tired. He stopped gently. "Enough for today," he said, making a stop gesture. Anya tried to protest, but he shook his head with a friendly smile. "Eat now," he added, pointing toward the house. She hesitated, then nodded with a grateful expression. Inside, Luke prepared a simple lunch. While he cooked, Anya watched closely, picking up new English words: bread, knife, water, stove. She whispered, each word under her breath, practicing quietly. "Your English is good," Luke said. She looked surprised. "No, not good," she said, shaking her head. He smiled. "It will be. You're learning." Anya looked down shyly, but he saw the small smile she tried to hide. After eating, they sat outside on the porch. The afternoon breeze was gentle, carrying the soft rustling sound of leaves and distant bird calls. Anya sat with her hands folded on her lap, her eyes drifting across the open fields. Luke sat beside her, giving her space. After a few minutes of peaceful silence, Anya spoke quietly. "I come from far place. Very far." Her voice was soft, but steady. Luke nodded, encouraging her to continue, but he didn't push her. He knew some stories took time to come out. Anya looked down at her hands. My family? Small. Not much. Money. She struggled for words, but continued bravely. I want better life. Safe life. Luke understood. Many people traveled far from their homes, hoping for new beginnings. She took a gentle breath. I write letter. To Earl. She spoke his name carefully. He say, he want wife. He say, he kind man. Her expression softened sadly. I believe him. Luke listened quietly, feeling a compassionate ache inside. She didn't cry, but the sadness in her voice was enough to show how much courage it had taken to leave her home for a man she'd never met. Anya continued. When I come today, he look at me, and she gestured toward the road, the same way Earl had earlier. He say, no. Luke closed his eyes briefly. He wanted to choose his words carefully. I'm sorry, he said softly. Anya nodded, wiping a bit of dust from her skirt. Not angry. Just alone. Luke understood more than he showed. She wasn't looking for pity. She just wanted someone to listen. And he listened, with his whole heart. You're not alone now, Luke said gently. She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were soft, but full of something new. Trust, maybe, or hope. Thank you, Luke, she said. Her voice carried more meaning than the words themselves. Over the next few hours, the two of them continued their slow, simple tasks around the ranch. Luke taught her how to mix feed for the chickens and explained the names of different tools. Anya taught him a few words from her language, laughing softly when he mispronounced them. By early evening, their communication had grown easier not because they suddenly knew each other's language, but because they were learning each other's rhythm. A smile meant understanding. A small gesture meant agreement. A quiet pause meant comfort. The day passed gently, like a warm breeze drifting through the ranch. As the sun lowered in the sky, painting the fields with soft golden light, Anya stood beside Luke and watched the horizon. This place, very peaceful, she said. Luke nodded. Yes, it is. Anya wrapped her scarf loosely around her hair. Today, I feel safe. Luke looked at her and felt the same warmth in his chest he'd felt earlier. He didn't say anything, but she saw the kindness in his eyes. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something small and quiet, like the first spark of a campfire, glowing softly before it grows. They didn't know it yet, but this quiet day, filled with simple chores and gentle words, would become the first step toward something much deeper. The next few weeks passed quietly on Luke's ranch. Each morning began with soft sunlight moving across the fields and the gentle sounds of the animals waking. Luke and Anya settled into a simple routine, one that grew more comfortable with each passing day. She helped with chores, learned new English words, and slowly began to understand the rhythms of ranch life. Luke noticed how easily she blended into his world. She cooked small meals with care, helped organize tools, and laughed softly whenever Luke mispronounced one of the foreign words she taught him. The ranch, once quiet and somewhat lonely, now felt warmer, almost alive, in a new way. But outside the ranch, people had started talking. Small towns always talked. Someone had seen the stagecoach arrive weeks before. Someone else had noticed that the young woman didn't stay at Earl's house. And soon the story began to grow in different directions. Even though nothing unkind had happened, people filled in the blank spaces with guesses. And those guesses reached Earl. One sunny afternoon, Luke was repairing a fence near the front gate when he saw Earl walking toward him. Earl's steps were quick, his hat pushed back slightly, and his expression looked tense, though not harsh. Luke set down his tools and waited. "Morning, Earl," Luke said calmly. Earl nodded stiffly. Luke, need a word with you. Luke didn't move. All right. Earl glanced toward the house, then lowered his voice. That girl. The one who came for me. She's still here? Luke kept his tone even. Her name is Anya. And yes, she's here. She needed a safe place. Earl rubbed the back of his neck and sighed. Look, I didn't mean for all this talk to start. Folks in town are saying things. About me. About you. Luke didn't react. People talk. They always do. Description. Description. The next time. Description. 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 Earl frowned. I'm not comfortable with it. Makes it sound like I did something wrong. Quote. Luke gave a small, calm nod. She traveled far. She arrived alone. She needed help. You made your choice. I made mine. Earl shifted his feet, clearly uneasy. I changed my mind, Luke. She didn't look like her picture. And I'm not ready to have someone living with me. I didn't mean to upset her. I just didn't know what to say. Luke listened quietly. Earl wasn't trying to cause trouble. He was just trying to protect his reputation. Luke understood that, but he also knew Anya deserved respect. Earl cleared his throat. Anyway, folks are saying you might be trying to claim she was promised to you. Luke raised a brow slightly. I never said that. I know, Earl said quickly. But rumors don't need much truth. Just takes one whisper in the store. Luke sighed. The town always turned small stories into long ones. Just then, Anya stepped out onto the porch to shake a blanket. When she saw Earl, she froze for a moment. Luke could see the tension in her shoulders. Earl glanced her way, then looked down. Luke stepped slightly in front of her view, not blocking her, but giving her comfort. Earl, I'm not keeping her here for any reason other than kindness. She needed help. And I had space. That's all. Earl nodded slowly, perhaps feeling a bit lighter. All right. All right. I just don't want people saying I abandoned her without care. Luke didn't say what he was thinking, that Earl literally left her standing in the yard with nowhere to go. Instead, he said gently, You can speak to her if you want to explain. Earl blinked. That option clearly hadn't occurred to him. I don't speak her language, he said quickly. Luke waved a hand. Simple words. She understands enough. Earl looked nervous. Maybe another day. I got things to do. Luke nodded. Sure. Earl tipped his hat and walked away, leaving the conversation unfinished. When he was out of sight, Luke turned toward the porch. Anya had stepped back inside, her face thoughtful. Luke joined her soon after. You saw Earl, Luke said gently. Anya nodded slowly. He, not angry? No, Luke said softly. Just concerned about what people are saying. Anya looked down at her hands. People talk too much. Luke chuckled. That they do. She sat at the table and rested her chin lightly on her hand. Luke shook his head. You don't. Anya looked up. Really? He nodded firmly. Really? Her shoulders softened, and she gave a sad but grateful smile. The simple reassurance meant more to her than Luke realized. In the days that followed, Luke tried to keep things normal. He taught Anya how to ride gently on Star, the calmest horse on the ranch. She practiced balancing in the saddle with her hands softly gripping the reins. Luke walked beside her, ready to steady her if she leaned too far. Anya enjoyed the lessons, laughing every time the horse gave a small, playful shake of its head. One afternoon, after practicing, they walked back toward the house together. Anya held the reins, while Luke carried a small bucket of oats. The air was warm, and the sky carried soft white clouds drifting lazily above. Luke, Anya said quietly. Yes? You help me. So much, she said. Why? She said. Why? Luke paused, thinking carefully. Anya lowered her gaze, touched by the sincerity. But also, Luke added slowly, you've been good company. The ranch feels nicer with you here. Anya's step slowed. A soft blush warmed her cheeks. She looked over at him with gentle eyes. I feel happy here. More than before. Luke nodded, feeling something soft settle inside his chest. But peace never lasted long in small towns. A week later, Luke rode into town to buy supplies. As he tied his horse outside the general store, two men nearby lowered their voices. Did you hear about Luke Carter? One whispered. He took in Earl's bride. People say he's trying to marry her now. The other added in a dramatic whisper. Luke didn't react, but he heard every word. He walked into the store calmly, bought what he needed, and left without a fuss. Gossip didn't bother him personally, but he worried how it might affect Anya. Later that afternoon, when he returned home, he found Anya sitting on the porch steps, her hands clasped tightly together. She looked up at him with worried eyes. People talk in town, she said, before he could even speak. Luke sat beside her slowly. Yes, they do. They think I caused trouble, she whispered. He shook his head firmly. No, you didn't do anything wrong. Anya looked away. Maybe I should go away. Find other place. Luke felt a quiet but heavy ache. The idea of her leaving made the ranch feel suddenly empty in his mind. You don't need to leave, he said softly. This is a safe place for you. But the papers, Anya said, tapping her chest. I stay only with permission. Yes? Luke understood. Then, immigration papers, legal status. Everything that she had trusted Earl to handle. Without him, things were complicated. We'll fix it, Luke said. I'll help you file new papers. You'll be okay. Anya blinked slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Luke nodded. Of course. Her breath caught softly, and she looked away. Blinking back tears she didn't want him to see. Thank you, Luke. Always. He didn't speak, but the quiet between them felt warm. The next morning, Luke took her into town to visit the small office, where paperwork could be filed. She wore her neatest dress and braided her hair carefully, wanting to look respectful. Luke walked beside her, steady and reassuring. The woman behind the desk smiled kindly as Anya explained her situation in slow English, sometimes glancing at Luke for help. The woman listened patiently and guided them through forms and questions. Everything will be all right, she said warmly. We'll help you. Anya let out a shaky breath, relieved. When they left the office, Luke noticed Anya looking lighter, almost brighter. She clasped her hands together and smiled up at him. I feel safe now. Luke smiled back. Good. As they walked back to the wagon, a soft breeze moved through Anya's hair. Luke glanced at her, noticing the peaceful look on her face. She looked like someone finding her place in the world, one gentle step at a time. And somewhere between those soft steps, Luke realized he wanted to protect that peace, not out of duty, but out of something deeper he didn't fully understand yet. Something that felt like the beginning of love. Luke woke early that morning, just like he always did. But something felt different in the quiet air of his ranch. For months now, the small, warm presence of Anya had become a part of his daily life, yet each day still surprised him in some gentle way. Sometimes, it was her laughter, drifting from the kitchen. Sometimes it was the way she talked to the horses as if they were her friends. Sometimes it was simply how she hummed a tune from her homeland, while hanging clothes under the bright sky. But today felt different in a deeper way, something he could not describe, only feel. He stepped outside, breathing in the fresh morning wind. The ranch looked peaceful, after the long weeks of struggle they had been through. The talk in town had finally quieted down, and Earl had stopped making trouble. Even the sheriff had said everything was settled for good. It felt like the world around Luke had finally learned to stay calm again. And in that calmness, there was space for something new to grow. Inside the house, Anya was already awake. She was kneading dough at the kitchen table, her sleeves rolled up, her hair tied in a loose braid. When she saw Luke, she greeted him with a warm smile. Her English had improved so much that she could now speak full sentences without much pause. "Good morning, Luke. I made dough early. Today will be a good day for baking bread." He nodded, smiling back. "Smells good already," he said gently, though the dough wasn't even baked yet. She laughed, and the sound filled the room with an easy brightness. Their mornings had become the heart of their life together. They worked side by side without needing many words. Luke fed the animals. Anya watered the plants. Luke chopped wood. Anya shaped it into small pieces for cooking. Everything they did began to flow naturally, as if they had always been a team. But what Luke didn't know was that Anya, too, felt something different inside her heart each day. When she first arrived, she felt lost, confused, and unsure of her place in the world. But as weeks turned into months, she felt more at home, safe, welcome, and valued. She often caught herself looking at Luke longer than she meant to, noticing the kindness in his eyes, the quiet strength in his shoulders, and the calm way he treated everyone around him. She admired how he never raised his voice, never made her feel small, and never let her carry a heavy burden alone. One afternoon, as they sat outside repairing small tools, Anya spoke in a soft voice, almost afraid of her own words. "Luke, you helped me when you did not need to. You stood up for me when you could have walked away." Luke looked at her, surprised by the emotion in her voice. "I just did what was right," he replied simply. "You deserved respect. You deserved a safe place." Anya nodded, but her eyes carried something deeper, something she hadn't said yet. Days passed, and the comfort between them grew even stronger. They shared stories from their lives. Luke about his childhood on the ranch, Anya about her parents and her village. Luke never judged her past, and she never tried to change his quiet nature. They fit together in ways that felt simple and natural, like two pieces of wood that leaned on each other for balance. One day, Luke found himself standing in front of a small shop in town. Inside, behind a glass case, lay a simple silver ring. It wasn't decorated with anything fancy. It wasn't expensive, but it had a warmth to it. A gentle shine that reminded him of Anya's smile, soft and steady. He bought the ring with calm hands, even though his heart beat fast. It wasn't fear. It was a hope he had never dared to imagine before. He kept the ring in his pocket for a full week, waiting for the right moment. He wanted it to be peaceful, honest, and real, just like the life they had built together. One evening, as the sun began to sink behind the hills, the sky turned into soft shades of gold and orange. Anya stood at the fence, watching the light fall over the horses. The breeze played gently with her braid, and her face glowed in the warm colors. Luke walked to her slowly, his heart steady but full. "You like the sunset," Luke said quietly. "Yes," Anya answered with a smile. "It feels like the sky is resting." They stood in silence for a moment. Then, Luke took a slow breath and reached into his pocket. His voice stayed calm, but his hands felt warm with emotion. "Anya," he began, "these months, they've changed my life. You've brought light into this home. Peace. Kindness. I didn't expect any of that, but I'm grateful for it every day." She turned to look at him, her eyes soft, curious. He opened his hand and revealed the small silver ring. "I don't want you to feel lost anymore. I don't want you to worry about where you belong. I want you to stay not because you owe me anything, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because I care for you. Deeply." Anya covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filling with gentle tears, not sad tears, but beautiful, warm ones. Luke continued, his voice steady. If you want, if you feel the same, I would be honored if you'd build a life with me here. A real life. As partners. As a family. Anya didn't speak right away. She simply looked at him, her eyes bright with emotion. Then, she stepped closer, her hands trembling slightly. Luke, she whispered. You gave me a home before I even understood the meaning of the word. You gave me respect when I thought I had none left. You made me feel strong again. And somewhere in all of this, I found something I never expected. She placed her hand gently over his. I found love with you. Yes, Luke. Yes. I want to stay. I want to stay. Forever. Luke slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had always belonged there. In the weeks that followed, the ranch felt brighter than ever. Neighbors who once questioned their bond now smiled warmly at them. Friends from town visited with good wishes. Even the quiet fields seemed to hum softly with happiness. Anya continued to learn and grow. Luke helped her with everything, always patient. And she helped him too, brightening his days, filling his home with warmth, and reminding him that love didn't have to be loud to be strong. Their life became a gentle rhythm of shared chores, shared meals, shared laughter, and shared dreams. They built everything slowly, with care. The same way Luke built fences, and Anya baked bread steady, thoughtful, full of heart. And in the quiet moments, when they sat together in the soft golden light, each one knew something true and beautiful. They had found each other in the unlikeliest way. But their love was no accident. Their love grew from kindness, trust, and second chances, a love made not from obligation, but from choice. A love strong enough to last a lifetime.